Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I make it 6 o'clock, so if we could make a start. Just the usual warning to people that are not used to the committee that this committee will be recorded and broadcast on the council's website, and if people don't want to be seen, if they could please notify the clerk to the committee, and they'll try to accommodate that. Apologies from absence.
I've received apologies from councillors Hale for the anti-Thursday, Chair.
Thank you. Urgent business. I've received no notification of urgent business. Declarations of interest. Has any member got any declarations of interest in the matters we're discussing? No. Public questions. We've got one public question. Is Mr. Schofield here? No. I'll read the question out, and Peter Richards, the head of planning, will reply. Can the chair of planning please explain why the planning application relating to the conversion of the business premises of Prospect House, Joy Street, Shaw, which has proposals to add a large extension and build into the roof space in order to convert into 12 one- and two-bedroom apartments, the effect of which will have detrimental effect on the neighbourhood in relation to aspects, privacy, highway issues, along with the loss of well-established training centre and therefore jobs, is not to be heard by the planning committee, but rather left with unelected council officers to determine, despite the level of public opposition to this development based upon its present scale. The council is frequently talking about openness and transparency. However, this application clearly seems to be being dealt with behind closed doors with no openness and transparency to be seen. If I could ask Mr. Richards to reply.
Thank you, Chair. The Council fully appreciates the concerns raised by Mr. Schofield regarding application FUL 34843322. As with all planning applications, this proposal is being carefully considered by the Council's planning service as part of the procedure for determining planning applications, including having regard to what the Council's constitution sets out regarding who the decision should be made by. While applications more significant, complex or contentious are debated and decided by elected members at planning committee, for example proposals that aim to create 20 new homes or more, the vast majority of planning applications are considered and decided by officers under the scheme of delegation on planning applications established by the Council's constitution, which of course has been agreed by elected councillors. This is necessary because the Council typically receive around 100 planning applications a month, and it is not feasible to bring all of them before planning committee, and so a line must be drawn to distinguish which applications come before planning committee and which are decided by officers. As such, in relation to the planning application at Prospect House, the starting point under the process for considering planning applications that has been agreed by elected members is that the application should be considered and decided by officers. On occasion, a ward councillor can ask that a specific planning application that would normally be considered by officers under the scheme of delegation, they can request that it be referred to planning committee for a decision instead. In such instances, the Constitution states that the head of planning, that's myself, in consultation with the chair of planning committee, currently Councillor Dean, must decide whether the application warrants a referral to the planning committee and so depart from the process that has been agreed by councillors under the Constitution. With regard to the planning application at Prospect House, Councillor C. Gloucester has made such a request for referral, but after considering the matters of relevance in the application and the degree of public interest in the application, it was not considered appropriate to agree to that referral request. In particular, it should be noted that while 22 objections to the application have now been received from members of the public, this is not unusual for a planning application. Therefore, as it stands, there is no reason to escalate this decision to planning committee. However, the Council are awaiting further information from the applicants on whether this proposal is broadly in line with the Council's adopted local plan, in particular the exceptions provided for under Policy 14 of the local plan. If it is, there will be no reason to refer the application to Planning Committee for a decision. However, if the information provided demonstrates that the application is not broadly in line with the local plan, given that the local plan is the council's adopted policy to be used to inform planning decisions, then the application will be referred to the Planning Committee for a decision for that reason. Given all of the above, the application is being considered openly and transparently in accordance with the Council's constitution, and the fact that it is being considered by Council officers under the delegations given to them rather than by Planning Committee does not alter that fact.
Right, thank you, Mr. Richards. If we could go on to the next item, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'll move them as a correct record. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Has anybody got any questions or observations on them? No? If we then move to the first application before us today, and that's land at Rotary Road, and this is a development of 365 houses, and if I can firstly ask the planning officer, who I think Mr. Digman, to outline the application to us.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me, by the way? Yeah, thank you. So, as the Chair has outlined, this is an application for residential development, 365 houses. There's a mix of tenures within those, so there's a large number of sale houses, but also some private rent and some social rented housing as well. These are the two sites. They're not contiguous, but in very close proximity to one another. Parcel A is located off Rosary Road. Parcel B is located off Hilltop Close and Deanshook Road. It's just giving you the aerial views of the site. Now, the site itself here at Rosary Road is previously developed land, and in the centre of the photograph you can see obviously remains of hard standings of former education buildings that were located on the site. Parcel B, again, gives you a clear indication of the areas of the site that were previously developed, because you can see the outline of the previous road network on the site. There will be some changes to the configuration of that, but the two main access points off there to the left-hand side, they will remain in place. You can see the remnants of some of the properties around the site. I think in the report there's a little bit of an error about the properties in the middle of the site saying they were renovated. I think they actually are later new build properties through the site. So this is Parcel A. This is 63 for sale houses on the site. Most of the land, as I say, is within the urban area and is previously developed land. In this particular case, there is a small stretch of land which is located in the green belt, which I'll go into shortly. As you can see, it's served largely off a single access point, but with a group of properties on Rosary Road served off a private drive arrangement. And this is a configuration that's been agreed with your highway engineer, and it ensures the retention of an existing bus shelter and bus stop on the frontage of the site. A couple of features to mention on this site. Again, roughly in the centre of the picture, you see a circle. That circle is an identified area of a former coal mine shaft. Initially there were some concerns from the Coal Authority that their records indicated a different position on the site, and members will note on the late list there is a variation to the recommended condition which deals with that particular aspect, and that follows further investigation and confirmation from the Coal Authority at the moment that these records are accurate, and what it requires is that there are extra precautions to be taken on the construction of the properties around that part of the site. The other elements to note is that the green strip at the northern end of the site, and this is relevant to the element of green belt that was introduced into the site. Initially, the layout included development on this area, and as you'll see in a slide shortly, there are some mature trees within that area that would have been lost as a result. The area of Greenbelt, which is the area, again, within the site boundary, you can just see kind of centre right portion, you see a group of properties there. That area was originally excluded and would have been the open space, which of course has now been moved to the wooded area of the site. So this is just giving you another indication based on that. So you see the hard standing, and then the area that effectively goes in a north-easterly direction. The area of Greenbelt is actually within that line. So you can see between the two areas of hard standing, there is effectively a distinct line which separates Greenbelt, which separates areas which visually can be defined as parts of the previously developed site, and the open space towards the playing field areas which are beyond the fence line to the southwest. So you can see from that, the Greenbelt boundary follows a kind of, not a straight line, shall we say. So it follows into the site, and it doesn't make a productive benefit to any of the Greenbelt openness elements of it. If I go down to show you the two areas, so the area on the left-hand side is the wooded area that we will be retaining. As you can see on the right-hand side, this is the condition of the Greenbelt area of land. You can see its relationship with the hard standing. You'll just about be able to make out the boundary fence that runs along that straight line from the site. Beyond there, the land has a different character altogether. So as you can see, the retention of this area as Greenbelt doesn't actually serve any practical purpose. Nevertheless, you have to demonstrate that very special circumstances exist if an area of land can be effectively removed from the Greenbelt. In terms of the benefits of the site, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of the retention of the trees, and also, of course, as members will know, the general lack of a 5-year housing land supply and the benefits of creating development on largely previously developed land, in our opinion, outweigh any possible harm to the Greenbelt. These are a few more photographs taken of the site itself. So this is the frontage onto Rosary Road. You see the original kind of railings there that were the school boundary. And then these are various views from within the site itself. And there's a modern housing estate which is located effectively to the northwest of the site. And the proposed properties obviously will be of similar style to those. As you can see again, the remnants of the hard standings that were previously around on the site. And these are looking again towards the northwest boundaries, so these are the areas of the site that were previously developed. If I just go back to the site plan itself, as I say, we've looked carefully at the relationship between existing properties in the site and the neighbouring properties. These meet satisfactory relationships in terms of amenity space, in terms of overlooking distances and so forth. Each of the properties has on-site car parking to a satisfactory standard, and all of the properties meet the national space standards in terms of residential amenity. Moving on to the larger site, as you can see, this is an area of more intense development. In terms of the features on this site, if we go back down to the left-hand bottom corner of the site, this is the entrance off Deanshook Road, and you can see in the white area, which is the existing Medlock Valley School. There were some concerns raised in comments that have been made about potential traffic congestion, particularly during obviously the morning and evening peak periods. In that regard, the existing carriageways to be widened in that location to allow, obviously, if people do stop on that site in the morning, to still allow through traffic to go on there. There are driveways opposite as well, which can tend to act as a disincentive to people to stop in those locations. Your highway engineer has looked to that relationship and considers that to be acceptable. Again, similar to the previous development site, the relationships between existing properties and the proposed properties are all considered to be acceptable in terms of privacy distances and relationships. There are some changes of level across the site, and there is a condition recommended for full details of proposed levels as part of the proposal. But in principle, this is considered to be a suitable, previously developed area of land on the site. One point I would make, and I think the objector is going to make one of these points in any case in his submission later on. At the top of the site, you can see existing development there. That development, there is concern about construction traffic being accessed from within that area of the site. There is a construction management plan being proposed, conditional on the development proposal. The applicant has presented ideas previously on how construction traffic will access through the site. That is not intended that it will use access through South Croft. So we have controls in place to ensure that that area is not used for construction traffic. Again, looking through the photographs on the site, as you can see, you see the remnants of areas of road that were originally there before the previous clearance of the site. As I say, some of these routes are retained, but in other cases there are tweaks to them. One of the obvious benefits of development on this site, you can see, is that the condition of the site. There are instances of fly tipping around the area and so forth. So there are benefits clearly in development of those sites. This is just again to give you some of the views. You can just see on the right-hand view there, these are some of the existing retained properties in the central area of the site. This is another element that was raised, members will see in one of the representations, about an existing footpath. There's a well-used footpath that links through to the school. And on the original layout, this would have been diverted into a fairly uncommodious route around the site. So this area has subsequently been amended so that it will be retained alongside the cul-de-sac route, and then at the left-hand side it then cuts back across the site towards the school. So this is a much more amenable route through to the site and will be retained, whereas on the original proposal we weren't satisfied that that would be the case. And this is just showing you in a little bit more detail that with the spelling mistake deliberately. Again, these are just showing some other views within the site, and these are more in the relationships to some of the neighbouring properties within the vicinity. This is back towards the Medlock Valley School, so this is that stretch of roadway that I mentioned previously, and the proposals include widening of that area. I'll just kind of quickly run through the variety of house types across the site. As I say, there's a mix of tenures, and also there's a mix of properties extending through from one bed, small number, and all the way through to 4-bedroom units on the site, and a mix of detached, semi-detached mews type properties. So these are just giving you some general views of those house types and the street scenes. So, in conclusion, both development sites, primarily on previously developed land, both in sustainable locations. The Council's aware of the lack of 5-year housing land supply. These will obviously bring forward development. And members know, in areas where members of the public generally say, let's stay clear of greenfield sites, these are exactly the kind of development sites that will come forward. We're satisfied that they will create a satisfactory degree of amenity and that they can be accommodated on the local highway network. In terms of other issues, a viability appraisal was submitted with the application. Normally, we would require for development of this type off-site provision for affordable housing and public open space, and for other elements such as education and health provision that may be required. In this instance, a viability appraisal was submitted, and that indicated quite clearly that the site could not sustain any of those contributions that would normally be required. So that's why, although issues have been raised by residents about education and health, for instance, provision, under the terms of the viability of the scheme, they cannot be required. Nevertheless, as I explained, there is a significant number of social housing units being provided within the site in any case, so the applicant's making sure that's provided on site. In terms of open space, there are areas around the site, and members will know Snipe Clough and the extended areas around what will obviously become Northern Routes, and with the various improvements which will be coming forward in the future on those sites, is effectively adjacent to Parcel B. So it's ready access for residents to those areas. There will be a small loss of trees on the site, and in accordance with the saved UDP policy, there will need to be replacement of those on a 3-to-1 basis. There is a condition which recommended, which requires the applicant to provide such provision. Now that can't all, of course, be on the site, but it can be on the adjacent council-owned land in the immediate vicinity, for which there will be benefit for these particular residents. Similarly, there's a requirement for biodiversity net gain. GMEU have indicated no objections in principle to the proposals, but again, that will largely need to be obtained on site. But as you saw, much of the existing site itself is previously developed and doesn't have any major ecological value. In terms of other issues, again, condition change in terms of the coal I mentioned previously. There's been further information submitted that has led to that change. In terms of information for drainage and ground conditions on the site, we have been working with the applicant to try to resolve those issues, but there are still some outstanding matters on those. So you'll see that conditions are recommended for those matters to come forward. And as you'll know, that's not an unusual issue on a planning application, and they would normally be proposed under conditions. So unless members have got any questions on that particular issue, application recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report as amended on the late list. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dickman. If we firstly ask any members if they've got any questions in regard to Mr. Dickman's report. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Graham, for that report, whatever you want to call it. I understand it's good, brownfield site, but obviously there was a mention there of some green belt land potentially. I know that I get the grade a good bit, so that's good, but can you just demonstrate on that plan how big this little plot of land would be, or whatever size it would be? Would that be possible? So the members will know.
Sorry. It's the area, so you're looking at Parcel A, which is the area on the left-hand side. And if you look at the kind of bottom right boundary of that site, you can see a row of properties. So you can make that out. That is effectively the area of the site. And as I said previously, what you can also see is on the right-hand side, an area of the site that was previously going to be developed, which is of similar size, that will be retained, and there is far greater ecological value on that area of the site. But the other element I was suggesting is that the line that follows through from that and then goes to the north-east of the site, it actually follows a direct line. This area effectively cuts in. It serves no practical purpose. And as again, I think the photographs, go back to the... Yes, photographs show. So the area Greenbelt is the area that you can see on the right-hand side. The fence that separates it out, the character of the land, the character of the site beyond that is completely different. This area is more akin to the areas around the former school site and the previously developed site. So it has no, in terms of the purposes and aims of the green belt, it doesn't serve any practical purpose. And in fact, the fence boundary almost defines it. That if I said to you, where do you think the green belt boundary is likely to be, and you went on site, I could bet to you wouldn't think that it did what it actually does. And to some extent, it may well be that that was a drafting error on the original scheme. The practical green belt boundary, and therefore the protection of impact on that larger area of openness, will still be retained and will be defined by the extent of the proposed development. Thank you, Chair.
Has anybody else got any questions? Councillor Allen Dan.
Thank you, Chair. It's a sort of follow-up to that, and it's probably not for the planning department to do this, but given that we're losing, and admittedly, as you say, it's not greenbelt for a good, an obviously good reason, the replacement land, so this parcel that we're now not proposing to develop on, is there any protection in place on it, and is there the potential for us to put protection in place so that going forward, an equivalent area of land is protected, and we will know that we've got a clear boundary and it works in future. We're not going to lose that land again in the future.
Yeah, through you, Chair. There's two elements to this, really. The land itself is council-owned, so there is a land deal which could take place. There could be protections included within that area. The other area we, from a planning point of view, could include protection, of course, is on the trees themselves, which, as you know, we don't necessarily put TPOs on council trees or council land and so forth, precisely because, well, the council is responsible, should we say, and therefore would not need that protection. As the land will be transferred to a private company, it could well be that we could put a tree preservation order on that area as well. So obviously future development of the site would be restricted in that way. If members feel that there is some additional control that's needed within the scope of the planning permission about future retention of that area, then we could look at an appropriate condition for that. Thank you, Chair.
Is there any further questions? No? Okay, if we then can go to speakers, and firstly, if we can ask Mr. Nick Gibbons to address us. Mr. Gibbons, which you've probably been told, you have 3 minutes. Just before the 3 minutes are up, you'll be notified. So if you could go ahead in your own time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the committee for letting me speak. It's very much appreciated. And can I just point out really that on the Flyview Google view that you've got there, on the existing land that was built on and now not, they were all demolished due to flooding and what other reasons. Our home did never and does not back onto any existing building. It was a former school, so we had a big gap from a playground and then the school, so we looked up, we have not blocked in any way. The question that I brought to on the email was on the covenant. In law, there is no right to a view. However, a recent case that was mentioned that I've emailed you, there was a right to a cause of annoyance, not necessarily of the nuisance. So it was the annoyance of the factor that was to protect the view, which I've mentioned. In addition to support this was our right to light, daylight and sunlight matters. And if I may put to the committee that if they have received a BRE 209, which is a daylight and sunlight assessment to accompany their planning application, this is a consideration not to be a mandatory document, but is highly respected of many. So we have the respect of local authorities, however, that have policies that seek to ensure access to daylight and sunlight that we have cherished all these years. It is not adversely affected by development. This document is nationally recognised in publication and used in design practitioners and planning consultants. It is also used in planning offices and proposed development to impact on our properties. I may mention the water table, that the developers are planning to raise our water table as we had the top of clay and we had to put topsoil in the garden habitually, which was flooded, which I may add, which is why Hill Farm Close was raised to the ground, and because all the buildings were sinking. I'm not going to go into the education part or anything else to bore you with that, as you've already discussed that, and I appreciate it. But my further objection was, obviously, during the construction, if it goes ahead, was to have no vehicular access go through Southcroft between 25 and 27 Southcroft. This area is not suitable for construction vehicles or general traffic or in any nuisance way to make it a possible attractive highway for others to use. I only advise that there's a possibility that we cherish that open land that's at the back of our home. We've never had a building there, apart from, as I say, the old school. As far as the trees are concerned, we hear owls in the night, we hear woodpeckers in the morning, and the sun shines through, and we thoroughly enjoy it. However, I look forward to some kind of development because it needs it. We all know it needs it. And it would stop all the fly tipping that we have in the area, which has been pointed out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbons. Has anybody got any questions of Mr. Gibbons? Thank you. I don't know whether you'd like to respond to the distance between the properties in regard to loss of light and overshadowing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just tried to zoom in as far as I can on this area. So this is the area you can see in the kind of just left of the centre at the top there. You'll see that the separation distances between existing and proposed properties will be well in excess in that location of a standard of about 20 metres we would normally expect on there. So in terms of, there's been no daylight and sunlight report submitted, we would not expect that to be the case in that kind of relationship. They are two-storey properties. At that kind of distance, there is no anticipation that there would be any significant loss of daylight or sunlight. And similarly, there's plenty of amenity space gap between there. It's appreciated that there may well not have been buildings immediately in the back of those properties previously, but it was a school site. It was a previously developed site. There is an area immediately to the north of that which has got trees on it. That area is not proposed to be changed as part of this development site. And I think we even looked at potential construction access from there at one point and discounted it completely because of the value of that site in terms of the trees that were actually on there. So there will be greenery still in the immediate vicinity of this particular site. Just in terms of some other issues, as I say, there are some outstanding matters in terms of ground conditions, drainage and so forth, but we've not received any objections from any of the statutory bodies in terms of the principle of redevelopment on this site. So in theory, it is all overcomeable, and a suitable scheme, suitable sustainable drainage scheme should be capable of being achieved. And again, that is a condition of the approval that obviously will need to be dealt with subsequently. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. No further questions. Could we then go to the applicant's agent, who is excuse my pronunciation, Miss Zulva, is that right? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 365 dwellings on land at Rosary Road and land at Hill Farm Close in Fitton Hill. The applicant is Countryside Properties. The parcels are owned by Oldham Council and For Housing and comprise a former housing estate and various school buildings which have since been demolished. Countryside are the Council's preferred development partner and have been working closely with the landowners to bring these parcels forward for residential development. The proposals complete a stalled regeneration project and will deliver much needed family housing, including 81 affordable homes. The scheme demonstrates a high-quality design providing a mix of accommodation. All house types are NDSS compliant. The proposals have been considered in respect of technical constraints, and the application is accompanied by technical reports and evidence that demonstrates that there are no known constraints which would prevent the site's redevelopment. This technical information has been considered by statutory consultees and officers and is considered to be entirely acceptable. Conditions are proposed to manage details such as remediation, drainage, landscaping and construction management. Countryside intend to start construction on Parcel B this summer, with completion due by December 2025. Construction on Parcel A will follow thereafter. Overall, the proposals will allow the redevelopment of brownfield land that has been vacant for a considerable amount of time. The proposals will boost the supply of housing, meet identified needs, and reduce the Council's 5-year housing land supply shortfall. Great weight should therefore be afforded to the delivery of these sites. We consider that the proposals amount to sustainable development and will deliver high-quality residential scheme in a sustainable location. As such, we respectfully request that you support your officer's recommendation and approve the application before you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the ward councillor for Medlock Valley, Medlock area, and I'm familiar with this particular area and development, and that's one of the most beautiful part of the ward. And I fully share the local residents' concern, and even though we really need those new development in the area, and sadly in this beautiful area, fly tipping is it becomes really a hot spot and it creates a lot of problem. But I really will request, I fully support this, but I would request to work closely with the local residents, because we've got a lovely community, we're very close community, and I really want development to take place, but they need to work with the local community to make sure that their wishes are being considered. Thank you.
Would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Countryside are very willing to work closely with the community to deliver an acceptable development on this site. I know Countryside have delivered presentations to the local community to welcome any comments that they might have, and that was during the consultation process as well. Countryside are very committed to delivering high quality schemes in Oldham and across the northwest and across the country. And any comments are welcomed.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at all? Right. If not, thank you. If we could go on to general discussions. The recommendation from officers is that this development is approved with all the appropriate conditions, including the ones on the late list. Has anybody got any comments or observations you'd like to make? Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, I think that your discussion of the construction traffic, that has already been addressed by the traffic management plan. So that, I think, should be resolved to your satisfaction, hopefully. Good. Thank you for the thumbs up. In terms of the flooding issue, or potential flooding issue, within this, it seems to deal, there should be a sustainable drainage system there that should be able to cope with that. Now, that's in the provisions, so potentially that should be dealt with as well. And so the only outstanding thing would be the potential, you mentioned overshadowing. Now, with the distances that are mentioned there, I don't think there is anything there that we can, there are set guidelines for how far away those buildings would be, and it is beyond that. So, for that reason, I think to the best of our ability, everything that you have been concerned about has been addressed by this. The one thing I would like to say is if we can introduce something to protect the sort of replacement parcel, if we can come up with for that. But beyond that, it seems a very acceptable proposal. And if nobody else has any comments, then I would propose we accept.
Right.
I'll echo.
So
I jumped the gun, I do apologise. There could
No,
be
it's
more
all right.
comment.
You moved approval, have you? Yeah. And Councillor Hussain has seconded it. I think that what we need to do is to put some either wording like some thoughts around the protection of the land that is already green, and I'm sure that that can be done quite easily. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the committee's agreement. There's potential for an additional condition that could go on in relation to areas of public open space that will be retained within the site. So we have a scheme for the future management and maintenance of those. So again, that's probably a fairly standard condition that members will have seen before. If you wish, we can add that to the recommendation.
Okay. So we will add that as an extra condition. Councillor Gloucester.
Thank you, Chair. Do we know what species of trees there are on that parcel of land at all? Is it a mixture, or is it... I just dread the fact that it might be ash and it might not be with us much longer. Thank you.
I think the agent will correct me, they're poplars. Yes.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that this development is approved. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And that is unanimously approved. Thanks very much indeed. If we could move on to the next application that we have before us, and this is a industrial building on Grimshaw Lane, Chatterton, and is it Mr. Lee that's going to introduce it?
Just a moment, Chair, I'll just get the screen sorted. So the site itself, as you can see on the screen here, the site location plan, it's triangular in shape. It's located to the west of the Rochdale Canal, which is at the top of that drawing to the north. It's at an angle, that image. So it's between the Rochdale Canal and Broadgate to the east of the railway line. The site itself comprises a pumping station, and there is a notably large electricity pylon on the site, which you can just make out on the aerial view, which is on the screen there. So the site itself, it does form part of a business employment area. That's its allocation in the local plan, and that essentially engages our policy 14 in the local plan, but that does support the principle of B2 and B8 uses. So the building that's proposed is in the corner of the site, as you can see there in the hatched area. So that's in the northwest corner, and then you've got the associated service yard to the east, and then that includes provision of space for the turning of HGV vehicles. So the adjacent, so let's go back to the site plan, the adjacent canal, it is important to recognise the ecological value of it. It is in a special area of conservation. It's part of a site of special scientific interest, and it's also a site of biological importance. So because of those issues, we have consulted with the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit and Natural England, and subject to the conditions that are on the recommendation, there's no objections from those consultees. And that's also the case with the Council's own arboricultural officer as well. There is a landscaping strip to the east alongside the canal, and you'll see from the conditions that there are issues relating to the details of that, which is essentially retaining it and enhancing it. And that's been supported by the arboriculturalist. The site's not in close proximity to any residential properties, given its location. The highway engineer has got no objections to the scheme, and importantly from a highways perspective, there is a new vehicular entrance proposed with the existing access being blocked up. So subject to the conditions set out in the recommendation, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Has anybody got any questions? No, that's good. This is a straightforward one. This building that's proposed is in an industrial and commercial area and is zoned that way, and there is no objections to the building from local residents or local industry. So I would move we approve it with the recommendations. Would that be seconded? Seconded by? Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. If we could move on to the next application, which is at the Meridian Centre, King Street, Oldham, and this is for a retrospective change of use.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is item number 8. This is, as you say, the Meridian Centre on King Street in Oldham. And this is a proposal for a change of use of units 16 to 19 and 36 to 41 from offices to a Crescent day nursery, and also for education purposes, as you can see from the description there. So in this case, the site is located adjacent to the King Street roundabout in the centre of Oldham, at its junction with Ashton Road. So you can see the site there edged in red. It does comprise a large building, so this application forms part of that, with the existing building hosting a number of established businesses. So the application is made on a part retrospective basis, with units 16 to 19 at the first floor already in use as a Crescent day nursery with the associated education aspect. And the application also includes the proposal to extend those facilities to the units 36 to 41 at the second floor, which is my understanding they're currently vacant. So the applicant provides creche and day nursery facilities for young children, as well as learning facilities for children and adults, to give some perspective of the nature of the proposed or intended use. So with this site, it is located as part of a business and industrial allocation in the local plan, and that essentially engages, there's two separate policies, the predominant one being policy 14, which seeks to protect against the loss of employment generating uses, unless there are exception criteria in the policy are all met. So with that in mind, the creche and the day nursery elements, they fall in the same use class with the revised or the newly introduced use class E as the offices that have been lost or are proposed to be lost as part of the proposal, because essentially they are in the same use class, so that change does not need planning permission. It is the element, the education element, that falls in use class F, and it's that element that requires planning permission, and at face value that conflicts with the requirements of policy 14. So there's no specific evidence submitted with the application to demonstrate that the exceptions criteria of policy 14 have been met. So that we've got no details of exact marketing details, for instance. Haven't got any details on viability, and any community benefits haven't been agreed in advance with the council. So what we're saying is the exceptions criteria to policy 14 in respect of the education element of the proposal hasn't been met, and therefore essentially what we've got is a departure from the policy. So with that in mind, we have to look at, we've got the opportunity to look at material planning considerations and other benefits, and we've come to the view that those actually outweigh any harm arising from the proposal.
and those benefits are securing the occupation of the units at second floor, which have been vacant for at least 2 years, provision of a facility to support families with children, and there are undoubtedly community benefits that align with our policy 2 in our local plan, given that it's an education element which to boost skills and of the borough's population, so there is a link there. And on balance, the cumulative benefits amount to a position where we feel that the benefits actually outweigh any harm resulting from the loss of the office accommodation in this particular case. And as such, in summary, the principle, at least, is considered to be acceptable. From a highways point of view, there are no objections been raised, subject to the imposition of conditions on the report. And in summary, it's recommended for approval, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we must point out that there was one objection to this, and that was mainly on safety grounds of children and parking. And I understand that that's been addressed within the scheme. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. This is in the report, and the Highway Officer will answer any questions.
So the safety of children and parking has actually been addressed within the report. Has anybody got any questions of the Planning Officer at all? Councillor Allen.
So it's for highways, so is it at this point or for later? It was a question for the highways, really. So is that okay now? I didn't quite follow on the report, because it's that relevant point about addressing the safety. It says the business opens from 9 a.m. and remains open to the early evening, and then it says children arrive at the site at 4:30 p.m. And I was just like, what's happening for the other 7.5 hours? And are there children there? And does there need to be something in place? It just didn't seem to make sense. So, is there only children there in the evening? And because that's the only point that seems to be addressed by that sort of traffic condition. Sorry.
Stirling. Wendell.
So regardless of, I can't really answer the question about when the children will be there. I just need to look at my notes to do that. So I'll have to in a minute. I'm quite happy that it's in a fairly sustainable location, so children could travel with their parents by public transport and walk safely to the site. So that's one aspect of it. There's also a 50-space car park available, and the operators of the facility, because this is one of the things I questioned, well, how will the children get from or be driven to, park safely and then be safely escorted to the building? So there's a 50-space car park, and there's a pedestrian route for them, and they'll be escorted across. So at busy times, I would imagine they'd be escorted across, and at other times they'll have their parents with them. So I'm not concerned about the highway safety issues of it. Would you like me just to quickly look through my notes just to see?
If you want, because it specifically says there'll be a warden from 4:30 onwards to supervise.
Well, that's probably for older children maybe that don't have their parents with them, because the two categories.
So for after school care almost?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I think it probably relates to the two usage, one being a creche and one being an educational facility. And that the educational facility is the one that we're actually looking at in planning terms, as I understand it. Has anybody else got any questions at all? If not, could I formally move approval? Is seconded? Seconded, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And if we could deal with the last application on the list today, which is 26 Yorkshire Street, and that is coming to committee because it's a member of the council's relation that's actually made the application. Mr. Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you say, the only reason why this application is before you is because it's a close relative of a member of the council. So this relates to an existing building which was formerly a pub, although not the sort of pub that I understand to be a pub, with living accommodation on the uppermost floor. The proposal, when it originally came in, was to convert the former pub space on the ground and first floor into 4 apartments. But as you'll see shortly, and you'll all know the site, it's in the town centre, it's a very commercial area, and we felt that the introduction of living accommodation on the ground floor wouldn't be acceptable. So the applicant agreed to change that, and as Martin mentioned on the previous one, we have this use class E, which is various business type uses, which include shops and cafes and so forth. That's now proposed for the ground floor with 2 one-bedroom units on the first floor. So this is the location of the site. So it's the building right in the centre there, to the right of the van. That's the property that we're dealing with. And that gives you a better view of that. So in terms of external alterations, there are some changes to doors and windows on the side elevation, but not significant changes to that. The ground floor element of it, the kind of fairly ornate frontage, that will still be retained, and the residential accommodation will be provided, as say, on the first floor. Now the entrance to the unit is in fact round the side of the building, so although it's not on the main frontage, and obviously it's never ideal for resident staff to use a side elevation, this is quite a busy street. It is a main street frontage, and the access to the accommodation on the second floor already comes through this area. This also provides access to the refuse facilities, which will be shared between residential and commercial uses. So it's the first floor element that we're interested in. Both these units meet the required internal space standards. Both of them have adequate access to natural daylight through the main windows on the side and front elevation. There's provision for cycle storage within the buildings being provided as well. And these are just the elevations. So again, on the front elevation, no changes really. On the side elevation, there's an introduction of new windows, which will match the size and shape of the existing windows on that elevation. So again, it's part of bringing the town centre into more productive use. We retain the commercial premises on the ground floor, but provide more accommodation for people to live in the town centre. It's in accordance with all local planning policies and recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Has anybody got any questions or comments they'd like to make? If not, could I propose we approve it with the recommendations? Is that seconded? Yeah. All those in favour? That's unanimous. And if we go to the final item on the agenda, which is for noting, and that's an update on planning appeals. I don't know whether anybody's got any questions on any of the appeals. No? I think they vary. I don't know whether anybody could particularly answer the question.
Sorry. Yes, on the table we've got there's a column with the lodged date, which essentially means when the appeal was submitted to the planning inspectorate. So they will vary, given the timescales from the planning inspectorate will depend on their capacity and the size and complex nature or not of each case. But the actual date they were submitted is in the report.
So basically it's down to the planning inspector to actually process them, and that's the time scale that he's processing them in. Okay, if there's no further questions on those, that concludes the meeting, and thanks very much for your attendance. I know everybody is happy and going breaks the fast, whether they're whether it's because of Ramadan or because they're just hungry.